Hi, my name is Tobias, and you might have seen my video about how to use Glyfter.com to turn an SVG into a 3D logo using Motion and Adobe Illustrator. Now, I've been told that it doesn't actually work with Affinity Designer, or that something is different. So I researched the whole thing, and the short answer is yes, Affinity Designer does work, but it's a bit more involved. So I've decided to make a special version just for users of Affinity Designer, and how to use Affinity Designer to make a logo, and then use Glyfter.com to turn it into a 3D font that you can use in Final Cut or Motion and anywhere else. So the short answer is you need to flatten everything or convert it to curves inside of Affinity Designer. Everything. So no strokes, no fonts. Everything has to be curves and has to be one curve, not like many different curve shapes layers. Just one curve on one layer, and then export that to SVG. And then it works with Glyfter and in Motion and in Final Cut. Now, if that didn't make sense to you, or if you don't know what I was just talking about, here is the step-for-step tutorial and how I figured it out. So take a moment, see what not to do, and then see what to do step by step. Now, first of all, please forgive this horrible logo design, but this is a test and just designed to have, well, everything that could be in a logo, which means a font, some shapes, and some lines or strokes, as you can see in the layers list. So I just tried to export that, and then I saw, well, Affinity has like different ways of making SVGs, so I exported them as all 4 different files. And then I also checked for converting the text to shape or curve and export again. So then I had a whole bunch of files which I uploaded to Glyfter, and in Glyfter I could immediately see that whereas the files from Illustrator looked correctly, here these files all have issues. So it looks like that Affinity Designer, when I exported, only the one file that has high quality export something settings, and I checked off for converting it to curves, like converting fonts to curves. That's the only file, as you can see, that actually shows the text. So I downloaded the font, put it into Motion, and had a look. And yes, there are issues as well. But however, there are different issues than what I assumed, because in Glyfter you see the stroke turned into filled shapes, but in Motion, well, it's still a stroke. But there are other issues, and yes, only the letter F, the SVG that I have exported as fonts flattened to curves, only that one actually works, but still has other weird issues. As you can see, there are holes in some of the letters. But yeah, 3D effect works, but it just doesn't look right, so I had to figure this out. So in Affinity Designer, I realized that my text was in the bottom layer, so I changed it to the front or to the top layer, exported it again, but Glyfter was suddenly offline. So later I returned, Glyfter worked, made a new font, but still the same issue. Then I turned the stroke into a curve, tried it Glyfter, you see the Glyfter looks different now, but in Motion it was still the same issue. Then tried a bunch of other things in Affinity Designer, but always the same holes in the text problems. And finally, after making 5 different fonts, I have figured it out. And as I quickly explained in the beginning, well, here now is the step-by-step guide of what you have to do in Affinity Designer so that Glyfter can display it correctly. So you might have a logo with many lines, outlines, strokes, fonts, and other drawn shapes. Well, the first thing you have to do is to convert all outlines to curves by pressing Layer, Expand Stroke on all layers with outlines or strokes. So now you can see that I don't have a stroke color or stroke width and just have a fill color. So it looks like a stroke, but it is actually a shape, a filled curve. The next step is to convert all text to curves by going to Layer, Convert to Curves. And now you will see that in the layers list, this is actually a group filled with individual layers with the shapes or the curves on them, but Glyfter doesn't support that either. So you have to ungroup the whole thing. Then you have a bunch of layers, and then I have found that you have to select all layers And then on the top, on the kind of right side of the screen, you've got different buttons called Add, Subtract, Intersect, and some more. And you have to use Add. And now suddenly everything is turned into one shape layer or one curve. So if you double click, you can see it's all one shape with one fill color. Just a really complicated path. And that's what I figured I have to do, and then it works. So then I go to export as SVG, the high quality web thing. I don't need to rasterize any fonts to curves, so I just go export, save the SVG file, and upload it to Glyphter, give it a name, and I'm done. So that way it works in Motion and Final Cut. However, there's still a tiny little issue where you can actually spot the line going through the letter O and also on the right side of the letter G. So something is still a little bit weird, but I think for most cases that is perfectly fine and acceptable. So yeah, it can be a little bit of a process to convert everything into curves and then onto one layer, but that's really what I found after spending quite some time, the only way of how it works with Glyphter. And it seems like that Affinity Designer preserves the different layers in the SVG and maybe Illustrator doesn't. I can't really tell if Illustrator's way is better than Affinity Designer's. I don't really know. I haven't double checked that. All I know is if I do it any other way, it won't work with Affinity Designer and Glyphter. But if I do it this way and flatten everything, like I explained now, into one curves layer, so only vector, no PNGs, no JPEG, it has to be all vector layers, and you can see it's path or curves. And yeah, if it's paths or curves, all in one layer, so basically one big shape, as I now explained, and you export it as a high quality web SVG, then it will work with Glyphter. So that's the involved process, but it works. So yeah, feel free and enjoy. And if you have any questions about animation or need help with somebody creating animation for you, you can always reach out to me at animationsbytobias.com, and then I can help you there. Thanks for watching and good luck creating videos and animations yourself.